Hello, community. Great that you are back. We're talking about reinforcement learning for our large language model, and we focus on a token entropy. Token entropy in itself does not exist because it refers to a token generation probability distribution, not a specific token. But you ought to say, hey, throughout our paper, we clarified that the token entropy that we are talking about refers to the entropy at a particular index t, which is determined by the token generation probability distribution p, rather than any specific token that is sampled here from the probability distribution. Now, you remember in one of my last videos, we talked about a token entropy calculation, and here you have it again, beautiful. And you remember the token entropy that we are talking about today is nothing else than the Shannon entropy of the predictive probability distribution P. And as you can see here beautifully, if we look at the mathematical formula for the probability, we are summing here over all j's, this means over all token j's in the available vocabulary of our system. Now, whenever we say a high entropy token, just to make sure it means a token that was generated at a particular time step t, where the model's predictive distribution p of t for that step had a high entropy. Token entropy is not a property of a particular token O of t. In isolation, after it has been generated, it is a property of the model predictive probability distribution over all possible next token at the moment just before the token was sampled. Just think about quantum mechanics. So it quantifies here the model uncertainty at a specific generation step. That's all there is. Now we have some new insight, and this is here beautiful. This is it already. If we have some reinforcement learning on some reward structure and we have a verifiable reward function, great, and we use policy gradients and not just Q function or maybe a soft actor critique system, then we will see that we discover that there are two classes of token. And they are what they call forking tokens, where you are here. You have to decide now if you go left, right, or straight ahead. And those particular tokens, that only about 20% of the tokens, they deliver significant performance gains especially when we scale with the model size. So if we have here, and you see this here in the blue line, you have a reinforcement learning training, not discriminating on any kind of token. This is identical for all tokens that we have in our vocabulary. You see here the accuracy in percentage for an 8B, 16, 14B, and 32 billion free trainable parameter LLM. And you see the blue line of all tokens. Let's take AIM25. You see this is the blue line, and this is the performance gain if you improve here the model size, and this is the better accuracy of the performance of the LLM. Now, if you apply this reinforcement learning with a reward function and a verifiable reward only on a very tiny amount of those very specific high entropy minority tokens, then you have here, I think it's a dark orange line. So you see, you get a much better performance, because there's a difference if you have a 45% accuracy of your model or a 56% accuracy. And this scales, as you see here, with the model size. So you will not see this effect at an 8B model. You have to go to models that have much more free trainable parameter, much more capacity for developing this specific reinforcement learning training behavior. So we have really so many available neural network connectivity possibilities that really here a specialization in the token is happening. Great. Now, here the authors give us here the frequent token with the lowest average entropy. And they say about 80% of all our tokens here have a real low average entropy. What does it mean? The system knows exactly when to use a cosine, a sinus, action and radius, right, left, theta, fraction. This is rather easy because the probability for this is defined. But let's look at here the tokens with the highest average entropy. Now this is where the reasoning process is actually going to happen, and you can improve the reasoning process if you focus in the reinforcement learning on those tokens. Because if you increase here their entropy, you can have a higher exploration rate compared to an exploitation rate of reinforcement learning. And it makes sense, no? You remember when we looked at the reasoning structure and the pattern that we read when the model, the LLM, the O3 model, or I don't know, O1, the new O1, O5, 28 was reasoning, you saw this, no? Since this is the case, or perhaps just here, note or solving this particular problem, or maybe not, or actually. So all those words are here if you want our indicator that tells us, hey, whenever we have those tokens in an autoregressive model, then there's a high entropy, and this is here kind of a forking where the model can find new, maybe better solution. Make sense? Beautiful. Let's have a look at the theory. So H is the entropy of a complete probability distribution at a particular step T. It is naturally to associate now this entropy in the simple terms here with the token that was eventually then sampled from that particular distribution at a time step T or T plus 1. But you might say, hey, wait a minute, you already had a video on entropy, no, just days ago. And we ignited there an AI entropy collapse. Yes, absolutely. And if you are here, subscribed to my channel, you saw already 3 hours ago that I posted exactly this particular paper. And I told you, this paper here is a perfect continuation of my video from just 2 days ago. And I would like to show you, if we take now multiple AI papers, and I can show you that they all fit perfectly together. They illuminate the same problem from different perspectives, but we can learn here from each and every single paper. So this is the paper of today. This is here from Qwen. This is here 3rd of June 2025, beyond the 80-20 rule, high entropy, minority tokens. They drive here the efficient reinforcement learning for the large language reasoning, and of course, in short side, also of vision language model. Beautiful. So let's have a look what they tell us. The authors tell us we analyze the underlying mechanism of reinforcement learning here through an innovative lens of the token entropy patterns. Now you know exactly what this means. Investigating how tokens with varying entropy, now you know exactly what this means, impact the reasoning performance. And this is all we are interested in. So the authors tell us, hey, just to make sure, we point out that we use here the chain of thought process for our LLMs. And the entropy distribution for this chain of thought here exhibit here a distinct pattern where the majority of the tokens here in our chain of thought are generated with a low entropy. Everybody knows exactly what will be the next token. There is no high entropy at all. While a critical minority of those tokens here, of the other tokens, emerge now with a high entropy. So those are exactly those points here where the way in front of you forks up in left, right, or straight on. Beautiful. And they say, through comparing now the textual meaning of these two parts of different tokens, we observe that the tokens with the lowest average entropy, they just complete the ongoing linguistic structures, no, the ongoing linguistic sequence. While, and now it gets interesting, the tokens with the highest average entropy, they function here as pivotal decision points in the reasoning of the complete LLM that really determine the trajectory of the reasoning among multiple potential pathways. So those are the, if you want, the token where reasoning can be improved. And as a quantitative results reveal that increasing now the entropy of those high entropy forking tokens leads now to a measurable improvement in the reasoning performance. So I say, hey, great, I don't have now to reinforcement learning here on all tokens, but I can reduce it here to just about 20% of the tokens, which is great. It's faster, it costs less, and we have a better performance. They say here, by analyzing the evolution of token entropy during the reinforcement learning training, we find that the reasoning model largely retains the entropy patterns of the base model. Now, this is important because this means whatever happened in the pre-training of the base model is the most important factor for the causal reasoning performance of this LLM. Even if you perform reinforcement learning to the max, the authors tell us we find that the reasoning model largely retains the entropy pattern of the base model. So there's nothing new, unique happening through the reinforcement learning. We just have patterns from the pre-training, and those patterns are now reinforced. They are amplified, but no complete new design patterns are emerging. This means exhibiting only gradual and relative minor changes as the training of our reinforcement learning with verifiable reward function progresses. This is important. It all depends on the quality of your base model. So this means reinforcement learning primarily changes the entropy of the already high entropy token, while the entropy of the low entropy token, the other 80% of our tokens, varies only within a very small range. It's not worth training those tokens at all. And they showed us, you remember what I told you about the scaling of the model? A Qwen 332B model trained with only 20% these high entropy tokens attains scores of something beautiful for a particular AIM-24 and AIM-25 benchmark, setting a new state of art for the reasoning model trained directly from base models with fewer than 800 billion parameters. So what a beautiful new methodology for reinforcement learning. And the authors tell us further studies and further investigation from their side here uncover that the high entropy minority token, those 20% of all the token, they account for nearly all performance gains in reinforcement learning. So this is now amazing. Reinforcement learning, what we thought, hey, this is happening here to all of our token. This is here a unique here, a coherence process over all probability distribution here. This is not anymore the case. Now with this study we understand 80% of all the tokens that we have in our system are just here a low, if you want, surprise or a low entropy distribution. Only 20% is where it's really happening, where new things can emerge, new reasoning path will open up to us. So, and those are the tokens we have to focus for the reinforcement learning. Now, DAPO. DAPO is one of the state-of-the-art reinforcement learning with verifiable reward algorithms without a value network. If you want to learn more about it, I have here a particular video where I introduced here DAPO, the 4 main techniques with clip high and dynamic sampling and everything. There's a video for you if you want to have a deep dive in DAPO. Now, DAPO here, we can now simply use here or modify for the highest entropy tokens. As you see here, we only have to modify 2 very simple terms in our code for DAPO. Here's a little bit of an explanation, and we can focus now on those 20% high entropy minority tokens. Great. What are the results? What is coming out? At first, they show us, okay, tokens here with a higher initial entropy. And those, let's say here from 80% to 100%. So here we have if you have here the average change here in the entropy on a log scale. So here, this is important. No? While look at the, if you want, tokens here with a very low entropy here, the percentile here. If you're somewhere here between, I don't know, 10 and 40, almost nothing is happening. We are 10 minus 4 here on average change function. So this is almost staying the same, whatever happens, the change after the reinforcement learning. So what's happening, what is changing is here 80% to 100%. This is our 20% high entropy token structures. Now, the result, let's have a look here at the Qwen 332B base model. And this is reinforcement learning on this base model, and this is the result now. Now you have DAPO with all the tokens, or we have now this selective DAPO process reinforcement learning focused on the 20% forking tokens. What is now, if we have different accuracy, beautiful, what is our overall improvement? And let's just look here at AIM-25. The difference between those 2 models, if we have a DAPO on all tokens or just on the 20 forking tokens, is plus 11%. Now 11% a performance increase is something I would apply in my code because I say, yeah, this is something. Whatever is above, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5%, definitely worth it. Try it out. However, and this is just to show you, if you have a Qwen3, and this is a Qwen3 is a perfect model, an 8 billion free trainable parameter, a base model where you have not reinforcement learning applied on, you see in AIM25, we just have a below 1% improvement. So you see, those tiny little 8B models, they are not mighty enough. They don't have the resources enough to develop those specifications now in the, if you want, token functionalization. They are not able to really benefit from this methodology. But if you go with a 32 billion model, yes, you see that's going up. Now it would be really interesting if we go even to higher model sizes, if this performance indicator would continue to climb up. Okay. About details, yeah, I would love to explain this to you, because this is something I looked at this and I have no clue what this means. Because why do we have suddenly a temperature here? And we have here, okay, a combined AIM score of 24 and 25, but what is red and what is blue and what the hell is going on here? Okay, I have a threshold of 1 in my temperature, but why suddenly you have a temperature here? So if you're new to AI, just 10-second explanation. You know, when an LLM generates a text, it does so in a sequence, predicting the next token based on the input and the token it has already generated an autoregressive system. And at each step, the model doesn't just pick one token, it calculates here probability for every possible token from its vocabulary to be the next one. Now, before those probabilities are now finalized, the model outputs here a raw, unnormalized score for each token in the vocabulary. And this score is what we call logits. A higher logit for a token simply means that the model thinks that this token is more likely to be the next. A lower logit means it's less likely to be the next token predicted. Now, with the softmax function, we have a simple function that converts our logit now to probabilities. And this is what we need for a GPT system. So to turn this logit into a proper probability distribution where all the probabilities sum up to equal 1, the softmax function is typically applied, or you can take further advanced softmax function. But why is it called a temperature? It comes from statistical mechanics and especially from the Boltzmann distribution, where it describes the probability of the system being in a certain state. In physics we have state, and in AI we have certain states, beautiful, as a function of its energy and its temperature. Now, in real theoretical physics, a higher temperature leads to more exploration of higher energy states. This means high energy is less probable states. And the temperature term comes now from statistical mechanics, the Boltzmann distribution. And over there, if we have a lower temperature, it is more focused, more predictable, it is more conservative in its thinking and its reasoning. It makes here the probability distribution sharper. You know, the peak is more pronounced, and we have a lower factor of entropy during now the sampling from this distribution. Exactly the opposite for higher temperature, more random, more diverse, more, if you want to call it, creative, but less coherent. So it makes now the distribution much flatter, more uniform, high effective entropy during the sampling. The model becomes more random, more likely to pick less probable tokens. So we have a higher exploration of the complete space. And this, of course, encourages here a more exploration-oriented model in the reinforcement learning training. So this is what we want to achieve if we want to find new solution paths. Now the same is now coming from statistical mechanics if we apply it here in AI. We have now, if you want, a decoding temperature. It is simply a hyperparameter that controls here also the randomness, or if you want to use here the human word, the creativity of the LLM output, by adjusting now the logits. We exactly defined what the logits are before the softmax function is applied. So if you want, we have additional parameter to play around a little bit here with what we later identify as the randomness of the output of the LLM. So you see, rather simple. Now let's come to this particular visualization. As you see, we have a red curve here, and we have a blue curve here. Clunk. And we have a beautiful, if you want, limit here at t equal 1, which is our pure softmax. So what is the red curve and what is the blue curve? Now, this artificial hyperparameter, what we call decoding temperature, is now that we fix here for the red curve the t low equal 1, so we have a standard temperature for the non-forking tokens, and we vary the temperature for the forking tokens across a range from 0.05 to, let's say, 5. And then you plot just the average aim benchmark score against this. And this is here the red line. For the blue line, we do exactly the opposite. No? We fix now the standard temperature for the forking tokens and vary now the temperature for the non-forking tokens in our system. And then we do the same. We plot here the average aim 24, 25 score benchmarks against this temperature. Just remember, temperature here is an experimental hyper variable applied during our decoding. So this shows us here, this figure, how the performance changes when we artificially modulate the sampling behavior at different token types by changing the decoding temperature. Now, let's interpret here the red curve here. Red. So when the temperature is very low here somewhere, the forking tokens are generated very deterministically, greedily. Performance is poor. You see, we have 68% or whatever. If we increase now this temperature towards 1 and slightly beyond, maybe at 2 or 3, you see here is the maximum, maybe at 2.5 or somewhere, we have now a key finding, making the model more random, more exploratory. This means with a higher effective sampling entropy, specifically at these high entropy forking points, helps it to reason better. We're here at the maximum of our red curve. It needs here the freedom to explore different paths here at those junctures. And if then we increase the temperature even more and we go here to 5, you see the performance drops here catastrophically because the choices become now too random and just nonsensical. So it's a very, very delicate equilibrium, and you remember this is the same in reinforcement learning. I told you this is a very delicate equilibrium between the exploitation of known solution path and the exploration to find new solution path. This is what you see here, and the blue curve is now exactly for the opposite. This is here when the T low is around 1. As you see here in the blue line, the performance is decent. If the temperature increased significantly, the performance drops now in the blue line also almost to 0. Well, that's exactly what we expected. Again, too random, nonsensical output, very poor reasoning. But even if we now reduce, if you want, the temperature, the performance here on the blue line doesn't change really a lot of, no? Might simply degrade a little bit from 71, but 71, 71, 71, 70.5, okay? Suggesting that these tokens are already quite deterministic, and forcing them to be even more so doesn't help, or even slightly hurts the performance of the complete system. So, varying now the temperature for the non-forking tokens is not really helpful. We should focus here on our forking tokens, on our 20%. And this is it. But now I would like to take another exercise with you. Let's extend this knowledge that we just gained. Let's extend it and add it to the knowledge from the last video where I talked about entropy in AI. And I told you there, and I showed you 2 different studies, and we looked at one study where we discovered if we look at the covariance distribution, it was the Qwen 2.57b, we discovered if we look here at the token, there's a very, very tiny amount of token here that have, if we look at the covariance here, a very high value. This means this is an absolute outlier because you see overall we are at 0.003, beautiful, but for a very tiny amount, this is a magnificent outlier. So small portion of token exhibit extreme high covariance, far exceeding the average. This is here, this outlier token take here the dominant part in triggering here the entropy collapse. And entropy collapse was exactly what was the main topic of this video and how to avoid the entropy collapse. This means to have enough entropy left that we have an exploration phase and not just an exploitation phase of our AI. And you know, the solution that we found is we have an advanced clip covariant module and a Kullback-Leibler divergence covariant version that helped us here with positive covariances that detach their gradients, and on the other hand, apply a Kullback-Leibler penalty on token with the largest covariance. Consequently, we had a policy model escape here the low entropy trap, and it could achieve a better performance on the mathematical reasoning performance of our AI system. Now, if we combine the last video and this video, you might say, does it contradict? Is it supporting now? What is it? Is it a different perspective? Let's have a look at this. So, all the three papers from these two videos correlate. And they offer now, interestingly, if you look at them, to get a more complete picture of the reinforcement learning dynamics that we encounter now in large language models. Brand new research. So everything that we have now in our training of the reinforcement learning, training, the early training here, at the beginning here, or when we encounter here a new difficult part of a problem, the LLM might be at a forking token position. Its internal policy assigns here real high entropy to this step. The LLM is completely unsure here in its probability distribution which path to take next. And the insight is here, the reinforcement should focus here on this particular forking tokens, this high entropy minority tokens. And through a reinforcement learning training update, the model learns that this particular token here, for example, is a good choice at this particular point where we fork here and where we discover multiple new reasoning paths. Now, last time video here is about successful learning, the transition to the high covariance. So after one or more successful updates related to choosing now this particular token X here at a specific forking point, the model's policy will now change. It will now assign a higher probability to this particular token in this context. So if this token now consistently leads to a higher reward function, a higher reward for the system itself backpropagating here, then this specific token position will now start to exhibit a high covariance. So, you know, pi, our policy to log pi is now high. That means the model is confident in its choice. So this successfully learned, once uncertain forking token has now become a high covariance token. And if we keep reinforcing it, it will continue significantly to reducing the policy entropy. So now we are talking about the policy entropy. And you know what happens if we increase the policy entropy? The policy entropy will collapse. So careful, this is now another interconnected system, heaven's sake. And we have to be careful how we treat now these high covariance tokens. And you remember I showed you two solutions. But if we look now at the complete system, knowing the content of the three AI papers, I could say, hey, those are all just two sides of the same coin if we look at optimizing the reinforcement learning process for reasoning LLMs. Now, on the one side that we look today in this video focuses on improving the quality of the decision at certain uncertain points in its decision pathway in its probability distribution. And my last video was, the other focus is here on maintaining the capacity of the system overall for exploration, for having enough entropy left so that we do not encounter the entropy collapse, that the entropy goes to zero, and the system always takes the same solution. We have only one solution path, and the system will always perform the same algorithm to come to the solution of a particular problem. It will never dare to explore new paths. This means we are locked into a box. And we do not want our AI systems to be locked. We want our AI system to have a little bit of an entropy left. That sometimes, you know, like a quantum fluctuation, it breaks out of our Schrödinger's cat box that it keeps confined, and it discovers here new learning path, new solution path. So the continued learning of this LLM can continue. Okay, this is it. I hope you had a little bit of fun. I had fun reading the paper, going in detail. You have a lot of numerical result. Please have a look at the data yourself. Have a look at the annex. There's a lot of information hidden there. But then try to sit back, relax, and then imagine you see all the 3 papers in front of you and understand how they are connected, what their insight means. And this was here the main topic of this particular video, because I wanted to show you, if you read multiple papers and you ask yourself, how are they connected? At first, it's a lot of fun to ask yourself those questions, and you will get a lot of deeper insight into, like today, how to optimize reinforcement learning for our reasoning LLMs. I hope you enjoyed it. Why not subscribe? I see you in my next video.